We've crashed every plane we've ever owned, and more than once, and we're sure you have too. So here's 7 reasons why your planes crash, and how you're going to go about avoiding them.
Welcome to Spitfiremen RC.
The first of these reasons is, of course, pilot issues, as frequently shown by a friend here. An example of this is when we're at one of our flying fields and we're doing engine failure tests. And our friend Mr. Oscar here was flying in for a landing and decided to go the slowest anyone's ever gone before, stalled, flying nose first into the ground, snapping off the nose of the Cub.
It was a gust's fault, not mine.
Yep, the wind.
Wind.
As always.
Yep, wind. We find some of the most common issues to do with pilot error include overcorrection, so moving controls too far after correcting from a manoeuvre. For example, when you're trying to go inverted and end up flying your plane into a tree.
Yeah.
Anyways,
the best way to stop this is simply by flying more and practicing. I know it can be tedious to just repeat landings all the time, but it's your best shot at making your judgment better, because that's the main thing, and getting a feel for the aircraft. On your maiden, you should test out your maneuvers to make sure you're comfortable with the aircraft and you're getting a feel for it properly, so you can make good judgments while flying.
and never fly an aircraft outside of your skill level. We've all been guilty of it, and it costs.
Not me.
Shut up. Secondly, another reason we see many crashes happening, especially across crash videos all over YouTube, is dodgy landings. One of the main reasons for dodgy landings to happen is lack of throttle on approach. Many people, especially beginners, me and oneself included, cut throttle just before we get to the ground. The problem with doing this, especially if you've got pusher aircraft, it stops airflow going over the elevator, therefore you're effectively losing your lift and you're losing elevator control, therefore basically causing the plane to slam into the ground. And if you don't have a resilient plane, well, you'll know. This
of course does depend on the aircraft though. So for example, a powered glider, you want to cut your throttle so far away from the runway. I've had this with the Phoenix 2400. You just need to glide it in with no throttle for ages, and that's the only way you're going to get it down in the field essentially.
Depends really on your approach or what type of aircraft you're flying. So how do you not have a dodgy landing? Remember, hot glue and tape fixes everything.
Even marriage. I've tested it.
But yeah, over time you get a feel for how to land different aircraft. It also matters on the surface of the runway you're landing on. We often take off and land on grass runways, but concrete runways can be a bit easier to land on depending on what you're doing.
Moving on to the third reason, stalls. And I'm sure this is the culprit for many of your crashes. When you're coming in for landing and you're doing your final turn, when you begin turning, it starts turning more than you want it to and the nose starts pointing down. You've just done an asymmetric stall, and it will continue going down until you have enough airspeed to recover or you hit the ground.
We all know what that feels like.
Well, it depends if you're under it or not.
Yeah, good point.
Be warned. This could also happen at high speeds, called accelerated stalls, when you exceed the critical angle of attack while going at high speeds. This is quite prominent with EDF jets. We've had it with the BAE Hawk, as you can see in the clip there. When it's accelerating fast and you pull up rapidly, the wing will drop very violently, which can cause loss of orientation.
Simply put, to avoid a stall, don't go too slow.
Or too fast.
Or too fast. Some people can especially be scared to put throttle on at different times in flight, depending on what they're doing. And judging your perspective, the distance from you and the aircraft away from you can change your perspective on how fast it's going. It's also worth considering the wind speed around the aircraft, as depending on which orientation you're flying in will depend on the actual airspeed on the aircraft. All these factors need to be taken into account when you're accounting for stalls. And quite simply, just give it a bit of gas.
Number 4 reason is turbulence. We all know the feeling of getting to the field and you take off your plane and it feels like you've just put it in a washing machine, which makes me really murderous to the people around, especially small families. So what essentially happens is, as the wind blows, it will go over objects like trees or little hills and stuff and create what's called wake turbulence. So it's where the air will start essentially spiraling in all sorts of directions, which makes your aircraft be completely unpredictable when near to the ground. This can lead to your plane suddenly making contact with the ground, breaking several parts, which I've had so many times, especially where we live, where it's quite windy quite a lot. And it's a big pain when you're there.
Also, if you've ever been near a slope on a hot or cloudy day, you may have noticed some more turbulence, even if there's no wind. This can be caused by thermals rising off the ground, creating very unstable air, basically causing your tiny model to wobble all over the place, maybe even causing you to lose control. How to avoid it? Good question.
Generally, when in turbulent environments, you want to keep your speed up. This will make your flight slightly more stable, but makes landings obviously more risky. Pretty much, you've just got to push through it, and the more practice you have, the better you'll be. Generally, EDFs handle better because they have a higher wing cube loading, which makes them slightly more controllable through rough air. It all comes down to experience, really.
For reason number 5 of why your plane crashes. Most of the reasons we've talked about to you up until this point have been your fault, or just the conditions on the day. However, one of the most annoying things that can happen is when you have electronics fail in flight, specifically servos, because for some reason, the servos we buy particularly, and other people buy, not just because they're off AliExpress, love to fail in the middle of a flight. This can be caused by a loose connection or simply the servo motor overheating, especially when you're using the common 9-gram servos we see in flight. When this happens, one of your control surfaces can get locked up or just start moving freely, which can cause all sorts of things to happen and you to crash your lovely $500 turbine jet just because your bad quality servo decides to kick the bucket on this particular hot day.
This also links in to the horrible situation, if you've had it before, of wiring your servos the wrong way for the ailerons. I had it once. It was worse than death, I think. I could not control the plane remotely. So you always want to make sure your ailerons and elevator are configured in the right way, and make sure you do your pre-flight checks. You always want to do them. They're so important.
We've had over 3 planes crash just because of servo failures. Mostly because we build them ourselves, but this also does include planes we bought from companies, so it is something to be careful of. If you're planning on doing heavy aerobatics, especially in heavier aircraft, considering upgrading your servos and checking if they have metal gearing, and that's full metal gearing, not just a few metal gears with some plastic ones left.
Reason number 6. I wrote tail fall off. If you go and watch our previous video, you'll see exactly what happens when you remove a tail from an aircraft, but essentially there is no yaw stability, so the aircraft will be yawing from left to right uncontrollably, and when you throttle up due to the torque of the motor, the aircraft will turn along this axis more than you'll be able to correct for with the ailerons. This once happened to me in flight when I was flying my amazing top flight Cessna 182, my beloved first aircraft. I took off and it just fell off completely. The aircraft started yawing to the left and crashed on a hill, which made me sad, and that was the end of that aircraft. So you should make sure your tail's on properly.
Especially when building your own aircraft. If you're using it a lot, chuck some struts on there, wooden sticks work, or anything you'd like really. You can even make it out of cardboard.
I wouldn't though.
Especially if you're flying in it. But that has been done. And finally, for reason number 7, one of my personal least favourite reasons is when a tree decides to spawn in the way of your aircraft out of the middle of nowhere, just so your plane completely totals itself. This particularly likes to happen when trees rapidly grow out of the ground while you happen to be going 100 miles an hour, maybe inverted, on a low pass.
As you can see on the clip here, Mr. Oscar here is landing his Hawk, and he did not see the tree that was right in front of him, and you can see he directly flies into it, which takes some very good skill. And you can see this all over YouTube. For example, Brian Phillips, who's quite famous for doing that. To stop this, generally just don't fly into trees. It all comes down to depth of field and your perspective on the plane and the tree. So generally you just want to stay out the way.
It's also worth noting, if you're flying circuits at the time this is happening and you are in quite a forestic area, make sure the approach path is clear and sufficient for your aircraft's angle of descent to be completely clear of trees. One of the places we regularly fly at has a number of trees around the area which have been subject to aircraft strikes. So just make sure where you're flying is appropriate for the type of aircraft you're flying, and that trees aren't going to grow out the ground in the middle of nowhere.
So let us know how you've crashed your planes and how you've avoided it in the comments below. And we might make an updated version of this video if you all enjoy it. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, cheerio!